When players hear their names called on draft night, it signifies all of their hard work paying off as they have officially accomplished their dreams of getting picked by an NBA team. However, this is only the beginning of their journeys, so it's still an uphill climb from there. Early in a young player's career, inconsistency, struggle, and inefficiency is to be expected as they adjust to the pace of play and physicality of the NBA game. While they need patience in order to develop properly and reach their ceilings, the players themselves need to at least show flashes of potential early on in order to give their teams reason to believe that the patience would be worth it, because if it's nothing but struggle, then they start to approach the status of being a draft bust, which brings us to the topic of today's video. Today we'll be discussing 5 young players entering this upcoming season on the verge of busting, meaning they absolutely need to elevate their individual games if they want to stick around much longer in the NBA. Before we start though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first young player on the verge of busting in 2023 is Killian Hayes of the Detroit Pistons. Hayes is going into his 3rd season, which is always a crucial time in a player's career, because after your 3rd season, you're typically either ready to sign a contract extension, or the team is beginning to plan their future without you. It's gotta be one or the other. Hayes was drafted 7th overall in 2020 as a point guard that was viewed as someone with an outstanding handle, solid size, advanced court vision and passing talent, and promising scoring prowess, but through 2 seasons, hardly any of that has actually come into fruition. In each of his first 2 seasons, he has been one of the least efficient scorers in the entire NBA, scoring just 7 points per game each season, while shooting it below 40% from the field and below 30% from 3 in both seasons as well. He seems to lack confidence when it comes to creating offense for himself, and when he does do it, it just looks like he's forcing it, and it doesn't look very natural. The fact that his shot just hasn't fallen through 2 seasons also definitely can't be helping with these confidence issues, but it's now make or break time for him, and this season will likely determine his trajectory moving forward. He has actually demonstrated a promising ability to pick out teammates with passes to set them up for easy looks, but his poor shooting plus his poor defense tends to overshadow it. The next player we'll be discussing, teetering on the verge of becoming a bust, is Romeo Langford of the San Antonio Spurs. Langford came out of high school as a top recruit in his class, hoping to be one of the first players taken in the draft back in 2019. But even though he did end up still being a lottery pick, being selected 14th overall by the Boston Celtics, there just hasn't been a time in his career yet where he's even looked like someone a team should be playing big minutes. Now, to cut him some slack, he has unfortunately struggled with injuries in each of his first 3 seasons, which has hampered his ability to find any sort of rhythm or establish himself at all through 3 seasons, but he's only managed to appear in 98 games, which is less than half of the games played in that time. But on the flip side, his play on the court hasn't really warranted a bigger role either when he has been healthy. When you get drafted by a team like the Celtics, who are fully devoted to contending in the playoffs, they also have less time to focus their energy on developing young talent because they need immediate impact, and inexperienced youth typically comes with a myriad of errors and learning curves. Langford has yet to average more than 5 points per game in a season yet, and for a guy who was drafted because of his knack for scoring, that's as close to a bust as it gets. Now that he's in San Antonio though, where they are clearly rebuilding, he's in the perfect spot to play more minutes and try to prove that he's a player that belongs. But if he fails to do so this year, then his time in the NBA may not last much longer. The next player on the verge of becoming a bust in 2023 is Cam Reddish of the New York Knicks. I made a video a few weeks ago where I discussed players that were struggling that I don't think you should give up on yet, and Reddish was on that list. And even though I do believe that, he is still objectively approaching a point where he's not going to get any more excuses. It's now up to him and him alone to put it all together and find a way to maximize those enticing attributes that he has in his game in order to carve out a consistent role on the team that he's on, because he has shown flashes of a guy who can perform at a high level in the NBA. It just hasn't come nearly consistent enough to fully buy into. Reddish has scored between 10 and 11 points in each season in his first 3 years, which isn't terrible, but it hasn't exactly been an impressive 10 or 11 either. He was very very inefficient in his first 2 seasons, and while last season he improved slightly in that regard, he found himself struggling to even get minutes after he was traded to the Knicks. Reddish has the physical tools to be a good defender, but yet he hasn't been a positive defender through 3 seasons. He plays under the mindset that he should be seeking out his own shot, trying to do too much at times, as opposed to playing within the flow of the offense and taking what comes to him, and from my perspective, the mindset that he plays with is what's going to need to change if he's going to salvage his career moving forward. If he can't earn consistent minutes in New York this season, then the likelihood of teams going out of their way to throw money at him in free agency will inevitably decline. Ever since his time at Duke, basketball fans have known that he has potential to be a very good player, but he's still working on actually putting it all together on the floor consistently. The next player on the verge of becoming a draft bust in 2023 is another former Celtic actually in Aaron Nesmith, who is now on the Indiana Pacers. Unfortunately, the Celtics haven't had much luck in recent drafts, having their second recent lottery selection up here in this video, but Nesmith was taken 14th overall in 2020 and just has not really produced at a rate that is to be expected of a lottery pick, even with the understanding that some young players need time. Of course, the same things that I discussed about Langford also apply here, in that Nesmith came into a Celtics team with serious contending aspirations from day one, so he was never necessarily a priority, but there were periods where the Celtics were desperate for some bench production over the last few seasons where either Nesmith or Langford could have stepped up and claimed a bigger role, but neither were able to do so. Nesmith was drafted in the lottery because at the time he was labeled as the sharpshooter of the draft class, knocking down threes at a very impressive rate in college, but in the NBA so far, he's made just 32% of his three-point attempts from deep, and when you're scoring just 4 points per contest, that's not the kind of efficiency that's going to cut it. Now that Nesmith is in Indiana, he too is in a rebuilding environment where he will likely be given a longer leash and a bigger role, so he's in the perfect spot to emerge and break out. But again, if he doesn't, then he puts himself at risk of fizzling out of the league altogether. And finally, the last player we'll be discussing approaching bust status in 2023 is Kira Lewis of the New Orleans Pelicans. Lewis is another example of a player where unfortunate circumstances have played a part in holding him back, as he suffered an injury in December last season that caused him to miss the rest of the year, but even before that happened, Lewis was struggling to make an imprint on the Pelicans in the time that he was on the court. His speed has always been his best asset, as he keeps pace with anybody in the league with that blistering speed, but the biggest area that he needs to improve in order to be a more reliable guard in the NBA is his jumper. Lewis shot 33% from deep as a rookie and just 22% from 3 last season, and even his mid-range game is a struggle, as he made just 34% of his pull-up jumpers from 2-point range last year. The Pelicans are now at a point where they too have a team built for playoff success, so if Lewis doesn't solidify himself in the rotation this year, he will unfortunately be on the outside looking in before long. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about these young players moving forward. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.